Welcome to Double Fries No Slaw, December 15th. We're 10 days away from Christmas, Richie. How you doing, bud?
Good, man. It's been a crazy weekend. Went to your neck of the woods yesterday for a baby shower. It took us about an hour and a half to get there and over 2 hours to get home. And I don't know when the commute from Orlando to Tampa started taking so long, but here we are. And then, a nice quiet day today, which has been nice. But how about you, man?
Yeah, pretty good. December is so busy and there's like a billion things going on. But we did absolutely nothing yesterday. Actually, that's not true. My kid's school had like this Christmas thing last night, but like we literally were just did nothing from, we watched the Army Navy game. I watched the, Celebration Bowl, stuff like that. Like we hung out around the house and did nothing. It was great. Relaxing. And then, church this morning. And then again, did nothing today after that. Watched Red Zone and just turned the Bucks game off because they keep frustrating me. So, Double Fries No Slaw presented by Guthrie's. You can check out all three of their locations: 1818 West Tennessee, 2550 North Monroe, and 2870 Appalachia Parkway. Make sure that if you're anywhere in or around Tallahassee, you are getting your gut box, Double Fries No Slaw. They have a location in Thomasville, I believe. They have a couple other locations fairly close that you guys can certainly go and check out. Appreciate everybody in the chat that's already in here and got this thing popping. If you're not subscribed already, you're watching the replay, or if you're live, make sure you hit that button too. All right, let's jump right into it. What do we have first here? We'll get to a few things here tonight as one of my lights just goes out. Let me plug that in. Since we're live, I don't want that to be on the first clip that we do. See, people never even know that it happened.
Looks like we have a quarterback, TJ.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Quarterback room has flipped. All right, so Florida State loses Luke Kromenhoek but gets Thomas Castellanos. All right, I've done a couple of thoughts on this, so I'll shut up real quick and get your thoughts, and then we'll talk about it. But just that swap, what's your immediate thought on that swap?
So I was actually a big fan of what we saw from Luke Kromenhoek in the limited action he had this season. I would have loved to see him stay. I'm not going to sit here and be one of those guys that was like, "Oh, I'm glad he's gone. He was useless." No, I do not think that's the case. I think he was very useful potentially in the future, right? But obviously some things happened behind the scenes. I'm sure you've covered all of that in other videos that people can go back and listen to. So please like and subscribe so you can see all of TJ's midweek videos as well as just our Sunday videos and Wednesday in season videos. And we'll probably get together to do other ones, in the interim. But I wasn't happy to see Luke go, but everything that I've seen, it's not a this is college football in 2024, 2025, moving beyond. That's going to happen. The Castellanos, I think I like the pickup a lot more than you do. I've seen your takes on it, and I think with Gus Malzahn coming in, and he immediately had Castellanos on campus once he was hired. I think I don't think there's a quarterback that really fits the mold of a Gus Malzahn offense, which is, what's something I've seen from a lot of people saying. I think Gus Malzahn will make his offense work around whoever that may be, whichever quarterback he has. And I don't think he's guaranteed a starting job next year. I think a lot of people are mixing that up a little bit. I think he's a quarterback that could come in and be the starter. Um, you have your pocket of Florida State fans who remember only the Boston College game from 2023 where he just absolutely destroyed us and Florida State held on for dear life. And the other pocket of Florida State fans remember the guy that got benched this year at Boston College. I think switching the offense to Bill O'Brien, I think that could have caused some of the reasons for him not working out as well this year. But I think he's a net positive addition. And I don't think, if it were him or Luke, if you could only be one for next year, there's not a clear answer for me. I'm not sure what your thoughts are between that one. But if you could only have one of those two for next year, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, definitely Castellanos or definitely Luke. I think, we'll take whoever we have and maybe even bring someone else in, which would not shock me at all. Brock Glenn is still in the mix. We'll see what happens there. but I'm not mad at the pickup. I'm not celebrating it, to the stars, but I definitely am not mad at the pickup.
Yeah. So having more time to think and having more time, like, obviously you have your initial reaction and you think what you think about something, and, your opinions and mine, you're allowed to change it, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to, oh, this is my original take, so I have to love this or hate this forever. Um, I'll say you mentioned, off the rip, like the idea of for 2025, like you essentially know what you're getting with Castellanos, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're Mike Norvell, I don't think you know what you were going to get out of Kromenhoek in 2025, right? Like how big of a step, and I fully believe, right? Certain people are saying, oh, this is why he left. Other people are saying, the family's saying this. They've done about 6 or 7 interviews, which in my opinion, the more you try to hit home a point of this is why this didn't happen, I promise, and you keep saying it over and over and over again, I don't know. I'm not trying to badmouth anybody that, I'll say this, that Kromenhoek family has always been super nice to me. They've supported our show. I've talked with Luke's dad several times. We had Luke on at one point. His dad was gracious enough to set that up. Like they've always been really good to me. So I'm not, but at the same time, we'll, call it what it is. There seems to be a pretty concerted effort to say that this didn't happen. And they certainly want that angle of it to be known. I think that for 2025, though, you probably have a little more certainty in what you're going to. No, not probably. You absolutely have more certainty in what you're going to get out of Castellanos. Castellanos is not a guy to me that is going to go out and win a national championship. He's probably not a guy that's going to go out and win an ACC. Like, let's just call a spade and be pretty realistic with people. Like, I'm not projecting Florida State to go to Charlotte next year. But I do think that there is a floor with Castellanos that you don't necessarily know how big of a step Luke is going to take from the Florida game to the Alabama game if he's your starter in both, right? And he may take a massive leap. He may end up at Mississippi State and they may go win 6 games, which would be a huge turnaround for them. They also went 2-10, which, I don't know if he's going to end up there or not. I just know where the visit is. But I do think there's a massive gap of uncertainty with what Luke can and would be by the time that Alabama comes to town. And to me, that was not something that Mike Norvell could risk. He couldn't risk Luke not being ready. Is there a chance Luke's ready by that game? Absolutely. Like, I don't know who Mississippi State or wherever Luke ends up. I don't know who they open up with, but we'll see, right? Like maybe he does make a massive leap forward. Maybe he goes somewhere with just excellent quarterback development and he makes a huge leap from that last Saturday in November to his first game on Labor Day weekend. I don't know that Mike Norvell could chance it. I don't know that he could chance whether or not Luke made that leap or Brock made that leap. I think he needed to bring somebody in. Castellanos right now has a higher floor than Kromenhoek or Glenn, in my opinion. If Castellanos starts for you from the time that DJ went down, right, against SMU, I think you probably win maybe 2 or 3 more games than you did, right? Maybe you finish 4-8 or 5-7, still disaster type seasons, but you probably beat Duke. If you don't fumble 8 times, which the quarterback had 4 of them, you probably beat Florida. Maybe you're competitive in the UNC game. So anyway, all that said, yeah, I think a little bit better a quarterback, just a little more certainty, right? Like the floor with Castellanos to me feels like about 5-7, maybe 6-6 is kind of your range there. And then, his ceiling to me is not super high. It's probably 7 or 8 if we're being honest, but the floor with Luke or Brock might still be 3 wins, 4 wins, like that might be where you're at. And so, yeah, I think for this year alone, it's probably a better move. Is it great for the future? Probably not. He's going to be here 1 year, I'm sure, and then go. And then we're going to be in this situation again next year. Who's ready? Do we have anybody that can play? Do we have to go back to the portal and live there again? Yeah, we might, but you can have a lot of success in the portal if you can continue to hit. But at the end of the day, I don't think Mike can think about 26. I don't think he can think about 27 or down the road. He has to make a bowl this year. And if he doesn't, I think he gets fired. And so was he confident that Luke and Brock alone could lead him to a bowl? I don't think so. That's why he went to the portal. If he was confident they could, then he wouldn't have. To me, the money stuff gets thrown around. The Malzahn offense stuff gets thrown around. I don't really believe that either because Mike learned from Gus in his press conference. Gus said, like, we basically have the same offense with little wrinkles, difference here and there. So I certainly, whether or not it's the money thing, I don't know. I certainly trust the people that said it was. Whether or not it's the offense thing, like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. What really makes the most sense to me is Luke wasn't, I think prior to this season, they kind of told Luke, like, this is your team 25 and beyond. Well, I don't think that he's far enough in development, and I don't think Mike Norvell can risk it with a new quarterback. If DJ, and I know I'm rambling at this point, if DJ would have come in and we'd have won 9 games, and say we get left out of the playoff at 9-3, which we probably would have, right? Miami didn't make it at 10-2. But say we would have gone 9-3, good year, not a great year. DJ plays a lot better. The offensive line is better. There wouldn't be a lot of pressure. And a lot of FSU fans would say, like, okay, now we're going to throw the young guy out there. And if we struggle a little bit, we go 6-6, like, not who cares? It's still Florida State. You're not happy with that. But if you throw a young guy out there and he's just not all the way ready, or there wouldn't be that same pressure on Mike. And I don't think Mike would have gone to the portal. Maybe he goes to the portal to grab kind of another depth piece, but if we'd have gone 8-4, 9-3 this year, there would be no pressure on Norvell, and he probably would have just ridden it out with Luke. It might have been kind of a rebuilding year in 25, but then you'd hope Luke could really take off in 26. And I think the fan base would have been accepting of that, right? You win 10 games, and then you win 13 games, and then you maybe backtrack a little bit and win 9 because you had 10 guys to go to the NFL. There wouldn't be pressure on him in 25. And so because of that pressure, things change, right? And would I love Luke to still be on this roster? Yes. It just didn't work out that way. But yeah, I don't hate the Castellanos thing as much as I thought I did. Again, your floor, I think, with him is probably about 5 wins. And that's probably higher than it is with Luke or Brock, unless one of those guys really takes off.
Yeah, and I think you make a great point, TJ, that, Mike, typically a coach is looking at long-term. They're saying, okay, listen, next year might not be as great, and they can't say that publicly, right? You cannot say that in a press conference because you got a lot of big money boosters watching these and listening, and that just does not work out. But he understands that next year is a pivotal year, and he has to win now. And by win now, I don't mean go win a national title, go win an ACC title, but he has to go out and show a much, much improved product. And he just could not, clearly was not willing to bet on that with Brock or Luke, which is why he went to the portal to bring the quarterback in. And again, I don't think Castellanos is guaranteed the starting job by any means. And I'm sure Norvell kind of made sure he was aware of that before he committed. But the fact that they brought in a portal quarterback, again, who's very intriguing to me. I guess that's the best word for me when it comes to Castellanos, is just intriguing to see what he can do. Because I think back, how frustrated I was, and you probably were too, TJ, sitting in the Rose Bowl in 2013, or actually it was actual year was 2014 at the time, watching Nick Marshall just, pick apart our defense that had been dominant all year. And granted, we do not have a Trey Mason on this roster, so let's be clear about that. But Gus Malzahn has shown to be able to.
That true freshman's pretty good. I'll say that.
Yes, we'll get into that too. But I'll save the Gus Malzahn talk for a little bit later. But going back to the quarterback situation, I agree with you 100%. And, we disagree on this pod a lot more than I think most FSU podcasts with multiple hosts have. But yeah, I'll agree with you 100% that this was a move that Mike Norvell felt he had to make. We both know Michael Alford. You know him a little better than I do. He's been on this pod several times. And I have no doubt he had a very difficult conversation with Mike Norvell and said, listen, it happened this year. I get it. This can never, ever happen again. If it does, I'm going to have to part ways with you. We know they get along well. We know they're friends off the field and outside of the Moore Center, but this can never happen again. And I think that's what we're seeing with this move right here.
So if you're watching this, we appreciate all the comments. We appreciate all the live viewers. Make sure that you hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you're part of the channel. What are we closing in on, Harlan? Something like 18,000. So we're getting somewhat close. I think that's the number. So help us get there and hit that subscribe button if you're watching it now or on the replay. So Croman Hawk was the big name that entered the portal. There's obviously been some other names that have entered the portal. Florida State's gotten a commitment out of the portal as well. Actually, 2 that we'll talk about here in just a moment. But Croman Hawk gone. When we did this last week, we talked about guys that might be leaving, and we were like, not really expecting a ton of big names or surprises, and then obviously two days later, Luke jumps in the portal, and there we go. There's your surprise. So, just some other real quick ones. I most of you know this. Most of you are super in depth into what's going on with FSU. So I'm not breaking any news here or anything. But obviously, Marqueston Douglas back, a tight end that was with you a couple of years ago, was out there with Dilly for a little bit of time in Arizona State. As long as you hold on to Landon Thomas and Amari Williams, I certainly think he'd be like your tight end 3, kind of a blocking option for you that can catch a little bit, but I don't know how much you're going to feature him. That feels like a pretty big depth piece at that position, but we'll see kind of how he's utilized or used. I don't think that one moves the needle for me very much. Omar Graham's an interesting one, Richie, that he did jump into the portal. That was a little bit of a surprise, and then removed his name and is coming back. Before we talk about maybe who Florida State might pick up, what are your thoughts on that in general? Like, not necessarily, Omar Graham, and I'm not talking bad about it, but like, what are your thoughts on this continuance of like jump in the portal, jump back, jump in the portal, I don't know. I've got some thoughts, but want to hear what you think.
I hate it. We saw it with DJ Lundy last year, who hopped in the portal, actually committed to Colorado, and then decided to come back. But I think that's where we are in college football. And if you're a program who's not an Alabama, Ohio State, or Georgia type level, you kind of have to tolerate this a little bit, right? And I think a lot of kids, and not just speaking of these individuals at Florida State, but throughout the entire country, they use it kind of as a bargaining chip, because the NIL is I think, I think the NIL and the portal combined is what's, really brought down college football for a lot of diehard college football fans who, when I was growing up, TJ, not even that long ago, EJ Manuel came here as a 5-star quarterback, redshirted, sat 2 years behind Christian Ponder, and waited his turn until his redshirt junior year to start at quarterback. Those days are long gone for the most part. Everyone wants their opportunity right now, right here. They don't want to wait. And if someone's willing to pay you a little more money, they'll go take it, which again, I will never, judge a kid for going to take more money, because we don't know what situation they come from. But I just hate that that's the situation we're in. I like Omar Graham as a player. I think he can definitely have some success and be a starter for Florida State next year. But I just hate that we're in a world now where, players that can attempt to, at the very least, and I'm not saying that's what happened with Omar Graham, but they can attempt to hold the collective hostage by threatening or by actually hopping in the portal and then saying, okay, never mind, I'll come back. It puts head coaches in a really bad position, because, if you're a leader at a job, right, and you have an employee quit on the job saying, or threaten to quit saying, I got more money offered over here, and then all your employees hear about it, and then they show up the next Monday, you're like, okay, guys, we decided to bring him back. It's just not a good look. But I also understand that's the world of college football that we live in today. And I guess for me, being the old guy on the show, it's just going to take some getting used to.
You're not that much older than me, but you don't have to give yourself too hard of a time. But hey, I'm an idiot. We actually are over 18,000. So yeah, that's obviously, I don't really care that much if I don't know the numbers. But yeah, help us to get to 19. So if you're not subscribed, to hit that button. We certainly do appreciate it. Yeah, I agree. I don't know what the circumstances around Omar Graham were. I don't know why he jumped in the portal. I have no inside information on this. I would be pretty surprised if Florida State gave him any more money. Probably just honored, kind of whatever was, whatever they had agreed on. It would shock me if he got more. Like DJ Lundy, I know got more money last year by coming. Like they didn't have anybody at the linebacker room, so they reached back out and said like, "Hey, please come back," and they gave him more money. I don't think that was the situation here. I don't know what Omar Graham's situation was, and I don't know that he's just an absolute superstar type player. That it was a little surprising that he went in, but I don't think anybody was like, politically correct, crapping bricks or whatever that he left. And so, but I do think it's a help that he comes back. I think your roster is better with him coming back on it, and he'll probably get pretty good play this year, pretty good burn. And so if he can continue to improve from where he was last year, then yeah, all signs, kind of a thumbs up there. But yeah, I wish we were in a position, and honestly, with a player like Omar Graham, you maybe could have made a little bit of a statement, but again, it all kind of, there are situations, Richie, like if you put in a good notice and left for another opportunity at your job and you wanted to come back a couple of years later, if you were rehireable and you left on good terms, kind of like Marquise and Douglas, right? Like
Yeah.
you could do that. And so I don't know why Omar put his name in. I don't know why he took his name out and came back, right? Um, Only Mike Norvell and the staff really know that, right? And Omar, for sure too. But obviously, Mike was okay with him coming back. I do just wish we could kind of play that Clemson game that they play, right? I saw the Steve Sarkisian quote from a couple of years ago of, man, when you put your name in the portal, like that's it. We have exit interviews for a reason. We talk with you for a reason. We try to get it all out in the air for a reason. And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't have taken Omar Grant. I'm not saying that, but I do just wish we were in a place where we could say like, no, like once you leave us, like see ya. Like that's we're kind of taking a hard line here. Now, I don't know what the situation around Omar Graham was. I'm not saying that I don't want him on the roster. I think he will help us this year. I just, in general, I don't like the way that looks, and it just again, it's a negative. I think on the program from an optics standpoint when you jump in the portal, and then the staff has to then start to invest other time and effort and resources and energy and money on recruiting other guys, and they've done that for a week, and then you jump back onto the roster and they've wasted all that time, and you've had changes. And so anyway, I don't know why it was done, but again, I wish we were at a point where that wasn't the case. Stephon Thompson, a linebacker from Nebraska, did commit. You got him in the fold. Again, I'm not, he's a big kid, like over 230, 6'1", doesn't have a 3-part name. So excited about that. Randy no longer on staff. We haven't talked about that, but we don't have to, but just woohoo. But yeah, Stephon Thompson commits from Nebraska. The first, I think that was the first guy you've gotten that, besides Douglas. I think that's the first pickup you really had in the portal outside of the quarterback position. Just portal in general, Richie, a couple of defensive linemen from Nebraska commit elsewhere. I kind of thought that you would have this plethora of guys coming in from Nebraska, and that really just hasn't been the case. You picked up a linebacker that I don't know how highly sought after he was. I don't know if he'll end up starting for you this year or not. I know that Cryer and Blake, if he sticks around, Cryer, Blake, and Omar will probably be your starters. But maybe a little bit of a depth piece there in Thompson. James Williams is the one Nebraska defensive lineman that you still think like you have a shot with, and he's still available. Also, Lee Hunter, a UCF defensive lineman that visited today, maybe sets up a visit later. Just overall, I know they got the quarterback. I know they got Douglas back again. Douglas, Thompson, I don't know how big of difference makers or needle movers those guys are, but it's only been a week. But does it feel like Florida State's been a little less aggressive than you expected?
I don't know if they've been less aggressive or if these players just have recency bias and are thinking 2-10 and have already forgot about 13-1 last year, right? Because that plays a role. These kids, if they're going to leave, they're looking for a better opportunity or more money. And none of these players that we're talking about, right, are the guys that you're going to overpay for. And so if they're looking for more money, Florida State's not going to be the place for this specific pool of players, right? But if they're looking to go to try and, maybe they're towards the end of their career and they want a chance at a conference championship, well, it's really easily to talk to a recruit who's considering you and Florida State right now, if you only have 1 or 2 years left, and say, listen, you just saw what happened on the field. They scored one touchdown in the United States this year, and I say that jokingly, but it's an easy negative recruiting pitch, and I don't like the term negative recruiting. And I'll give credit to Josh Newberg. He's the one who's always said it. There's no such thing as negative recruiting. You're just saying, hey, this is the situation there. This is what it is here. It's like any job. If you are a hot commodity in your industry, and two big time companies want you, yeah, both companies are going to say why they're better than the other company. And right now, Florida State is not in a good position, and they just overhauled the entire coaching staff. There'll be some more changes coming. I don't know. Florida State's just not in a great spot right now. So if you are, one of the top players in the portal, and Florida State comes after you, Florida State is going to have to overpay for whoever they get, and if they do that, they better hit on them.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's just interesting because you're also, I mean, the recency on going 2-10 is big, but also just, the Nebraska guys that didn't even visit is really interesting when you bring that coach in. And I don't know if that's I don't know if that's
us for him.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like it's just an interesting spot to be in because you were able to sell the portal a couple of years ago, coming off of 3 wins and 5 wins. You sold it pretty well. And, I don't know, maybe there's a bigger wave, maybe there's more guys jumping in, but it doesn't, there's not a lot of confidence that they've done a ton. I mean, really, they've done nothing on the offensive line yet, and that's certainly the position group that you kind of look at and you're like, all right, guys, let's, like, what's the Judge Judy, slapping her wrist and hitting the table? Like, all right, guys, let's go, man. Like, and again, it is just week 1 of the portal. Nothing's been decided. Guys are on visits. But, like with the Lee Hunter, the UCF kid, obviously played for Gus, obviously going to demand a pretty hefty NIL. Where, what I've seen over the last couple of years that has been really effective for other schools is not letting guys leave, like not letting guys get to their second and third visits. And those Nebraska defensive linemen, I think Florida State was attempting to set up visits with them and no visits ever got set up. And so is that a problem with, why was that, Richie? Because the school they got to said, we ain't letting you leave without committing, right? Like we got to lock you in a broom closet until you agree to us. Like we're doing it. But, that aggressiveness of like, no, we're getting this done. When we got Jared Verse, remember what Jared Verse said? They were the first ones to call me. They were the first ones to set up a visit. They were the first ones to get me to campus. And he did take other visits, but where did he end up committing? When we took Braden and we've taken other guys, Johnny Wilson, others, what did they say? We were always like the first one on them in the portal. We were always the first one to set up a visit. We were always the first one to get them to campus. And that made a huge difference on guys. And so that just, again, I understand the 2-10, but we've got a lot of time to be spending on this. We ain't got a bowl to get ready for. We've got a lot of guys leaving. It's not like we have to re-recruit our roster because a lot of the guys leaving, you're good with leaving. And so, I don't know. It seems less aggressive to me. Again, I'm sure 2-10 has something to do with it, but just the same way that you saw the aggressiveness of the last 2 weeks in recruiting with all the flips, I kind of expected that same kind of hair on fire, aggressive, relentless approach that you saw a few years ago in the portal. I kind of expected that. Maybe that changes. Maybe this week, maybe we're back on here next week and I'm just eating crow, right? And say like, hey, they had it all set up for this week, but I don't know. I don't have a ton of confidence there.
Again, it just shows, kind of the theme of the show, at least for my narrative so far, has been the change in college football and what it has become in 2024 as we head into 2025 for the next few weeks. It's crazy because before the early signing period, when it was a February signing day, you always wanted to be the school that got the last official visit. Kids get 5 officials, and if you were the 5th one and they locked it in, you immediately felt really good because kids come off their official high. You're the most recent thing in their mind. But when it comes to these portal kids, they're not looking to have a long thought out recruitment because they've already done that once. And you do want to be the first one to get them on campus. And it's a little disappointing if there was true interest in some of these Nebraska transfers that you were not the first school that they chose to visit for whatever reason that may be. I know these coaches have only been here for about a week or so. But it's crazy when the strategy of recruiting high school kids versus portal kids, it could not be further more different than what it is. And, this is why I can't recruit in our dynasty in college football 25, TJ, because I just have no idea what to say to any of these people.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we'll see what they end up doing. The portal is not closing after 1 week. I'm not trying to have a major meltdown over 1 week of the portal. I think the furious close on the recruiting trail maybe set up, at least my expectations, to be a little bit, hair on fire portal, setting up visits left and right for really good talent, and that just hasn't happened yet. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm just being a little impatient here. 2-10's got me on edge, right? So, all right, let's give some love to Garnet and Gold, garnetandgold.com. Listen, if you're doing your holiday shopping, 10 days to go. You need to get your orders in now. they deliver very quickly, but the postal service is slow right now. FedEx, UPS, all those things, super slow around the holidays. So make sure you get your orders in. GarnetandGold.com will save you some money on your Christmas shopping if you use code NOSLAW, NOSLAW. Appreciate Garnet and Gold for all that they've done, not only for FSU athletics and supporting our boosters, supporting our NIL, but also for our channel. Make sure that you're shopping at GarnetandGold.com. Again, NOSLAW, NOSLAW. Richie, as we move on and talk about this a little bit, I tweeted this earlier in the week, but did you know that Gus Malzahn is the only coach to beat Nick Saban 4 times while Saban was at Alabama? 3 times as a head coach, which, again, the only one to do that too. And then once as an offensive coordinator in 2010 when they had none other than Cam Newton, former Gator legend. Only coach to beat him 4 times. So just hearing that alone and knowing that we open up with Bama next year, a Bama team that is still very good, but a Bama team that is certainly susceptible to losing to bad teams now without Nick Saban. Don't let Lindsey hear this. Does that get you a little more excited for Gus Malzahn?
Yeah, and they went to Nashville and lost to Vanderbilt, and not to take any credit away from Vanderbilt, they were actually a pretty solid team this year. They would have beat the brakes off Florida State as well. But yeah, it's wild when you hear that because Nick Saban it's not like he beat 2007 Nick Saban, which was what Bobby and Jimbo did, right? In Saban's first year when Louisiana Monroe beat them as well. No, these were all in Saban's heyday, and I would say all 4 times. Well, not outside of the Cam Newton year when he was a coordinator, as you mentioned. The other 3 times, Alabama was the better team all season long, but Gus just found a way to scheme things open and just get it done. And the offense of Auburn was a big reason why they won those games. It wasn't just dominant defense by Auburn. It was the offense going out and making plays with guys, no matter who it may be. I mean, obviously the kick stick was one of them, one of the greatest plays in college football history. But I think that, bringing in Gus Malzahn, I think was a huge move. And I think the reason I love it the most is because he did Norvell did something that Jimbo refused to do, which he said he would do. People might forget. Jimbo said, I got a 5-year plan to give up play calling. Well, no. Norvell actually saw the season and said, listen, whatever happened this year, I don't know, but it can never happen again. I need to have more oversight over the big picture, be more of a CEO. And he brought in someone who he knows very, very well and trusts and has made it clear he's giving up play calling to a very experienced and successful college football offensive coordinator or an offensive mind in Gus Malzahn. For those reasons, I love that hire.
Here's the other thing I like about it a ton is because of the system and the wrinkles that he does run, I don't think Florida State has the time to rebuild kind of a pro-style attack or a brand new attack. Obviously, people were in love with the UNLV offensive coordinator, which I think, what did they go out and score, like 10 points in their conference championship or something. But anyway, I people were in love with this guy or in love with that guy. And I don't think Norvell, and you can love the Malzahn thing, you can hate the Malzahn thing, right? Like the Bama part of it is kind of a fun, quirky, like side of it, but I certainly like play it up more, but it's not nothing. Like knowing how to beat Alabama and having a consistent a history of doing that when no one else has is certainly not nothing. But I do think that the idea of like changing the entire offense to go to the go-go or to bring in the Tulane guy or to bring in this guy or that, like whatever your thought was on what Florida State should have done with the offense, changing it completely. And though that's what, certain former players will have you think that Florida State is doing here, I just don't know how realistic that was. Like, I don't know how realistic it was for Florida State to absolutely change everything and have success next year, right? Like, really hit the ground running and win games. And so the more I think about it, the more I kind of attack it from that angle. I think the Gus hire makes a lot of sense. There are things that Gus is, I would say, no longer like elite at, right? Like his offense at times, talking with UCF folks, maybe somewhat predictable. But I do think the focus is on the right things and running the ball a ton and taking, pretty good deep shots down the field. Now, can Florida State do that successfully? Can they can't, I mean, obviously the proof is in the pudding, right? Like you've got to come out and perform well and execute well when the lights come on Saturdays. And obviously they haven't done that very well in any of 2024 outside of that opening drive against Georgia Tech, which will certainly just live in infamy in our minds. But I think that keeping things similar, people forget like what all the Gus tree has birthed, right? It's not just Norvell's offense, who certainly didn't just forget how to coach offense. It's not just what Gus has done in the past. It's not, I mean, Rhett Lashley came from that. There's a lot of good that's really come from that offense. And I think that gives you hope. Just the idea of like, you don't have to change everything. You may just be able to tweak a few things and kind of get back on the right path. Obviously, just having a competent quarterback and a competent offensive line is going to change a ton. And so people freak out or obviously everything is so extreme, right? One side or the other. I don't think the Malzahn thing moves the needle a ton way up or way down. I think that if you get decent offensive line play and decent quarterback play, you easily make a bowl and maybe you find your way to 7 or 8 wins. Maybe you find your way to 9. The 9 feels like the absolute ceiling, but to me, it's not as, I don't know, it's not as life or death. It's just, hey, can we tweak a few things? Can we take a little bit off of Mike's plate so that he can focus on other things within the program? And from there, how much success can we find?
Yeah, and it's going back to your point earlier, TJ, in the show where you talked about Mike needs to win next year, right? So if he weren't in that situation, if his job were safe, no matter what happens next year, maybe he does bring in a different coordinator and install a brand new offense, understanding that it's going to take maybe 6 games into next year, and then it really won't be till game 1 of the following year till they really hit the ground running. But no, he's bringing in a very similar offense, very similar terminology when it comes to calling plays. So to make it as easy as possible on whatever offensive players we do have left, the ones we want to keep, hopefully we can keep them. And I think that's a big part of it as well. He just wanted the smoothest transition possible offensively, knowing he had made the decision to give up play calling. I don't think he was forced to give up play calling, but I think he was told, listen, if you keep calling plays and this offense looks like this again next year, that's on you. So I think he just wanted to do something that was comfortable and familiar. So it's kind of the safe bet. Could he have brought in, like Miami did it back in 2020 or 2021, whichever year it was, when they brought in Rhett Lashley to completely revamp the offense, and it was a wild success. But then they lost him in a year. Now, that's not to say Gus Malzahn might not leave after 1 year. But again, I think Mike Norvell, all he's looking for is a bridge this year. And that's probably where this hire came from. So again, I don't think it's a huge home run hire by any means, but I do think it's a fairly safe one. UCF's record was not good this year. People can say that he might have been fired if he didn't resign and come to Tallahassee, but they still ran the ball fairly well. And that's what Mike wants to do. He wants to run the ball and then push it downfield. And I think with Castellanos, that adds an extra dimension to the offense to where now you have essentially an extra blocker when you have such a mobile quarterback like him. I think it was a well-calculated decision by Norvell in a year knowing that he cannot have a 4-8 season next year or he's likely gone. He will never admit this. He's going to say the goal is 12-0, get to the playoff, yada, yada, yada. But he knows he needs to get to 6 wins next year because anything less may cost him his job.
Richie, I don't think that people will lie very much this offseason, right?
No.
I mean, we'll see, right? Like, I feel like this fan base is just a little smarter than like the Miami fan base or the UF fan base that just, lies their tails off, at all times. Like, if you had to project it right now, kind of my best case scenario is probably like 8-4 if we were doing our season preview. Now, I guess we'll see how the rest of the portal goes. We'll see how the spring window goes. Like, there certainly could be things that come up and impact that in a different way. We'll see what Miami and Florida do because those are 2 of your tougher games for sure, along with Clemson and Bama. But I don't think people will lie very much this offseason. I think they'll be pretty realistic when we get on here in August and predict our wins and losses. I would imagine you and I, who lean a little more optimistic, will probably be around the 7-5 or 8-4 range, right? Probably give us a win more than Vegas, which I would imagine Vegas
easier non-conference schedule helps.
Easier non-conference,
2
and
auto wins. So
easier. I think it's easier in conference too. Like this
yeah,
year, what did we play 10 bowl teams
I believe.
along with 3 playoff teams?
Yeah,
And we didn't have a quarterback or an offensive line.
yeah,
Like, the schedule was incredibly difficult. You opened up with Georgia Tech, who took Georgia to 8 overtimes, a fully healthy Georgia Tech. Like you played 3 playoff teams, and then you
with
played a
the
team
South
that
Bend.
finished number 12 overall in Miami. Like, if not for auto bids, you played 4 playoff teams, And so, yeah, I think it's really tough to think like, yeah, this team played a very difficult schedule. Next year, I think you play 4 of the bottom 7 ACC teams, which obviously Florida State was in there too, but Stanford really bad. NC State wasn't very good. Sorry, Hunter. I think you play Virginia and Virginia Tech, 2 really, like Brent Pry's on the hot seat. Virginia wasn't very good. And so you replaced like SMU and all that. And yeah, you play Alabama, but you played Notre Dame on the, Alabama at home. I understand that Alabama's logo is what it is on the side of their helmet, but I'm just telling you, Alabama at home is an easier game than Notre Dame on the road. Like it just is. Like there's no doubt about it. This is not Nick Saban's Alabama, right? They're still going to win 9-10 games next year, no doubt. But they're not as good as Notre Dame. And certainly playing at home is an advantage. So anyway, I don't think there'll be a lot of lying going on. But if Florida State was able to find a way to win that first game, which I'm not projecting, right? Like I'm not predicting that. If they beat Alabama, the lying will start. And it will start pretty hot and heavy at that point. Like, so
There will be egregious lies.
yeah, if Norvell wants us to lie for him again, just beat Bama. Like it's just really simple. Like just beat Alabama to start, and we'll lie our tails off. So, Richie, give Roback some love, and we'll get to our last segment and get out of here.
Yeah, we're really excited that Roback decided to partner with Double Fries No Slaw this season. The RHOBACK.com, Roback, use promo code DFNS20. Hoodies, polos, joggers, shorts, some of the best performance gear you'll find. We will give you 20% off your first order. You can't see Harlan, but he's wearing the same hoodie as I am right now, right there on the screen. Probably the favorite hoodie that I own right now. Again, go to roback.com, use promo code DFNS20, and you will get 20% off your first time order. I promise if you order one, you will not regret it, and you will order more. Holiday season, I cannot think of a better time to get it, and they will ship it out immediately.
All right, Richie, let's talk a little bit about this. So I've seen some jokes on social media, and they're not really jokes because this is kind of what Florida State is doing. But Florida State's defense is the Nebraska defense, and it's meeting the UCF offense. Just think about that statement like 5 years ago if I'd have told you that. Like Florida State's going to have UCF's offense, Nebraska's defense. Now, both of those units were top 20 units. Is the ultra positive way to look at it, I think. The ultra negative way to look at it is that one of those two teams missed a bowl and one team went 6-6. Obviously, the Big 12 is very offense heavy, so that may skew UCF up a little bit. And the Big 10 is very defense heavy, which could skew that up a little bit. So, like everything else, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Like I'm not saying like, oh, it's definitely they're both top 20, and so Florida State's gonna have top 20 offense, and the defense is top 20, so they're gonna have but just thoughts overall on basically taking the best unit from Nebraska and bringing all those coaches here, and then taking the best unit from UCF and bringing the offensive coordinator, the wide receiver coach, and the offensive line coach here.
Yeah, I think again it's Mike Norvell. He could not afford to take risks in hiring assistants that to fill positions that he fired, right? I think he knows that next year is the year for him. I think if he felt a little more job security right now, he might have gone out and tried and, made some splash hires or a little different ones. But, you look at total yards, Nebraska was solid. You know, UCF's offense, they ran the ball well, which is what Mike Norvell wants to do. But yeah, it's nothing. Again, to your point, we just talked about. I'm not going to sit here and tell lies and say, "Oh well, Nebraska, held this team to this many points," and UCF. Oh, did you see how many points they put up on this team? I don't think anyone's overly optimistic thinking we're going to go, 10-2, 11-1, 12-0 next year. That's not where my mindset is right now. We'll see how the portal season finishes out, and then spring camp and then spring portal, and try and get an idea of how things are looking. but yeah, it's nothing to get overly excited about, in my opinion, clearly. But this is where we are right now, so this is what we have to do.
The I haven't gotten a chance to chat with you about it because it happened middle of the week last week, but just on the UCF, so I think people are more excited about the defensive hires, without a doubt, right? I think the Gus stuff doesn't have people super optimistic. I don't know how crazy optimistic they are about the wide receiver hire, though he was a former Cane, though he's got some relationships in South Florida and may help you in recruiting some. Teaching, Florida State hasn't recruited that position poorly. They've just done a good job, a very poor job of developing it. And so jury's probably out there, but as not underwhelming, but as maybe as much as the offensive side, like people aren't like doing backflips over. I am really excited about Herb Hand. I had Clay Fink on from Knowles 247 to chat about him and some of the experience there, and he is widely thought of as one of the best teachers of offensive line. He's not, he's probably not even to the level of Atkins on recruiting. But in 5 years, he has more NFL draft picks at UCF than Florida State did under Alex Atkins. And so just an elite teacher of offensive line. And to me, this team will go as far as the offensive line takes them, right? I've talked about this, but Florida State was in the 90s in run blocking this year. I'm sorry, in pass blocking this year. Out of 134 teams, they were in the hundreds in run blocking, right? Just, overall, I think they were in the 110s actually. Overall, just a putrid offensive line. When you put both of them together, they were around the 100 mark out of 134 teams. For context, there's about 65 Power 4 teams, right? And so when you are that bad and you're behind not only all of the Power 4 teams, you're also behind a lot of Group of 5 teams in how well you do on the offensive line. I mean, honestly, just getting up to like 60, just being better than all the Group of 5 teams, right? Or just kind of being in that 2/3 ish range. If you could just get up to where you're like the 60th best offensive line from better development and better teaching and better, grab a couple of guys from the portal. I know the Vandy tackle is somebody that they certainly are looking at, but if you can just get average with the offensive line, that's probably, to me, I like Knighton. I like his energy. I like his excitement. Nebraska's obviously flipping out about losing him. I like the White hire on defense. I think they'll be more aggressive. I think they'll do a better job. I don't think Fuller was good at all. I think White will be a better recruiter. There's a lot I'm excited about on defense. To me, the most important hire, more than Malzahn, more than White, more than Knighton, was absolutely Herb Hand. And if we're going to make a bowl next year, if we're going to be competitive against any of these teams on our roster, it will be because we brought in Herb Hand and he develops guys a lot better than they've gotten in the last 5 years at Florida State.
I'll just say you heard it here first. By no means did I have any inside info. I just said that's what I wanted. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago on the show, once we knew that Alex Atkins was gone. But I'm really excited about him. You have to think about where you are and have a realistic understanding of where you are in the college football landscape right now, right? So when it comes to offensive linemen, elite ones, especially coming out of high school, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the highest profile programs, which Florida State certainly is one of them, but they're not necessarily on the level right now as Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, and Texas. Now, you could overpay to get them, but guess what? You're not going to outbid Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, or Texas. So you need to get those guys that are in that 180 to 260 range in the national rankings out of high school, and you need a technician to develop them. And I really think Herb Hand is that guy. Your stat that you just dropped about draft picks from the offensive line, UCF versus Florida State the past few years, that speaks volumes. I am a huge fan of this hire. I'm probably more excited about Hand than I am about Gus. And I know you probably don't get Hand without Gus, but I truly think that's what you need is just an absolute technician to help develop these guys because you do have some talented players on this roster. You had guys like a Darius Washington who were thought of being potential All-Americans this year. Amari Smith, who, nobody thought was going to be all-world, but thought, well, if he continues to develop, and we just have not seen that development. So I think this was a phenomenal hire. And I think getting him here when you did is a great deal. And having him, that's the position group I'm going to watch more than anything outside of Thomas Castellanos and whoever else we may bring in at quarterback, because I don't know if we're done there yet.
I looked at some PFF grades for Castellanos last year, and his PFF grade when he wasn't under pressure was like 90 plus. Like it was like the elite of the elite. Now, coming in Florida State, we obviously expect him to be under pressure some and having to use his legs and having to roll out and things like that. But again, yeah, if they can just be somewhat serviceable in pass pro, they will be in much better shape. Again, is it going to be tough against Clemson? Is it going to be tough against that Miami defensive line? Is it going to be tough against the Florida defensive line that was really good toward the end of the year? Absolutely. Nobody, but against teams like Stanford and NC State and Virginia Tech and the two gimme games that you've got, you didn't have two gimme games this year. You only had one because you played in Memphis with that other one and obviously lost it. Yeah, they should be able to raise the floor considerably. And in talking with Clay, the hire that I'm probably, again, with Hand being the hire, you're most excited about, I'm most excited about, I do expect the run blocking to get a lot better.
Yes.
I think that's the quickest thing that you can teach. It's a little bit more, it's a little less, assignment gap, picking up pressures, things like that. Like the offensive line should be much better run blocking. And again, they were in the 110s last year. Like that is, that's got to get better, right? And if it doesn't, it's Mike's last year. And so he's putting a lot of eggs into one basket, pulling everybody from Nebraska and then everybody from UCF. But I do think he has a chance to work out, right? And work out, I'm not projecting the playoffs or the ACC championship or anything like that, but I do think it's got a pretty good chance of being successful because of who you brought in. So anyway, I think, they certainly need to do more to follow that up. They certainly need to do more in the portal, at offensive line. Again, I don't think you're finding like elite superstars in there. I think that, the offensive line is very hard to recruit in the portal, but you can certainly find guys, like you pulled Byers up. I know he wasn't great for you, but you pulled Byers up and, what would Byers have looked like if you had, he was one of the highest rated players in the portal. He was great at UTEP, and then he got here and he was terrible. Well, I don't know. Was the level of competition, or was it the fact that, he wasn't taught very well? I don't know the answer, but it's probably a little bit of both, right? And you pulled Bless Harris up, and he was really good for you. And then obviously he left and went elsewhere. But you certainly can find those guys. You pulled a Dylan Gibbons. Like you can find those guys. It's just how well does Florida State do there to kind of help raise the floor of that room. There were some young guys in that room too, whether Lucas Simmons can kind of step up, whether Jonathan Daniels can step up and be good. Obviously Early is going to be back. You've got Rizzy back. You've got Otto back. Like there's a lot of guys that can still play for you. I expect Richie Leonard to play again for you next year. So there's enough like inside talent. They got to find some tackles. They got to find and that's certainly the hardest position in all of football to find in the portal. But if they can get a little bit better there, there's some promise that the offensive line can improve. Well, I guess it really can't be much worse than it was last year. So, if you're still watching this almost an hour, and make sure that you hit that subscribe button, we certainly would appreciate it. Again, almost, trying to get to 19,000. Let me get the number correct. And about 800 to go there. So Rich, you got any shout outs or anything before we get out of here?
Yeah. Shout out my buddy, Chris. He's the one who was at the baby shower. He's been on the show actually when we used to do the fan predictions, and we'd bring them on to talk for a few seconds.
Oh yeah.
He and his wife had a Masters themed baby shower yesterday, which was awesome. And they're expecting next month. So we're really excited to welcome baby Jack into the world.
I don't have any shout outs. Shout out baby Jack. That's all I got.
There you go.
So Chris can have my shout out too. So, all right. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you guys for hanging out every Sunday night at 6 p.m. We'll be back next week to talk about it again. We will put out a bunch of videos this week and keep you updated on anything that happens. That's all I got. Appreciate you, Richie. Appreciate Harlan for all your work on the back end. And we will talk to you guys soon. Go Noles.